Hello, welcome to episode 2 of Dealmaker Nick, my auto-bio series and videography of basically my life. And in episode 2, we're going to find out about my first steps into the music business and meeting Eddie Grant and UB40 for the very, very first time. So let's get into the video. So in this episode 2, I just wanted to let you into my life as working in the record business as assistant to Tony Calder TC. And in essence, that's more or less what my life evolved around at that time. So in essence, TC had a business called Marylebone Management Services Limited. Don't know where the name or whatever came from. And in it, we looked after the management of either artists, business management of artists, independent record labels, and other ancillary and publishing deals and so forth of big publishing companies and so forth. And we basically, in effect, we did the deals with the major record companies or the major publishers, and we ended up getting a commission from doing so. So yeah, it was definitely the first of your Mr. 10% men. And so some of the artists we were involved with in the early days. The first deal was Fiddler's Dram with Day Trip to Bangor, which was, I think, got to number 3 or number 2 in the UK singles charts. And we did that deal, or Tony, I mean, when they say we, TC did that deal with RCA International with a guy called Kees Vessels, who I would meet later, who's a lovely Dutch guy. And I ended up going to a football match with him in Holland. He was based in Amsterdam at that point. And shortly after he was the international manager for RCA International, he actually went out and formed his own record company. But that's by the by. Eddie Grant, Living on the Front Line, was a recent hit. That has sort of happened before I joined, but he would obviously later have a bigger career and have future big hits. And we also looked after UB40 via Graduate Records. So Graduate Records was our client, and UB40 were their main artist. And the interesting thing about UB40 is how they made it. The first single will always be known as Food for Thought, but when we actually picked up the original disc, the B side, which actually the A side, was called King, which was a tribute to Martin Luther King, and that was the A side. But what actually happened was a DJ called Pete Powell from the Radio 1 DJ flipped it and started playing the B side, thinking what a great record this was. So that most artists or whatever know best. So it got made into a double A side, but in essence, no one was interested in King. Everyone was interested in Food for Thought, and they had a top 5 hit. And we did basically what we did with UB40 is we would arrange for all their licensing deals for their records to be manufactured under license overseas, where Graduate would receive a royalty, and then they would have their own arrangement with UB40 in how that would split. So that was just an insight into how we did business and how everything started. So shortly after all of this had happened, I ended up going to Ibiza with UB40 to do a gig. In essence, somebody had approached TC and said, could you be interested in getting Eddie Grant at UB40 to do the the Bull Ring in Ibiza as a gig? And Tony spoke to David Ver at Graduate and also Eddie Grant. They said, yeah, we'll do it. But they saw it as much as a holiday, and their band came, and they were promised 5-star treatment, etc., etc. So we ended up flying from Gatwick Airport, but we didn't fly direct to Ibiza. We flew to Barcelona and get the boat across. And it wasn't what, the band had just had a big hit, and it wasn't exactly what the band were expecting. And when we got to the accommodation, it wasn't a 5-star hotel. It was like it was from Carry On Camping. They're still putting the doors on the hinges. I'm sure the band will remember it very, very well. But the band, if you look at the band's roots, there's pretty much from where they came from. It was still, still pretty good. Obviously, they're now all superstars, and I'm sure they'll look back in these times and have different views about it. But it was really good. So that I sort of got to hang out with UB40. They tried to throw me in the swimming pool a few times, and I also remember going for dinner, and always remember Robbie Campbell liked his steak well done, and he kept sending steak back about 5 times so much the chef actually got Robbie Campbell to come into the kitchen and actually cook it himself. And he said, "You must be crazy, you're killing it, you're murdering the steak." But that's how Robbie told the story afterwards. But obviously whatever went on between the chef and Robbie will remain between those two. We then went and did the concert, but the band wouldn't go on stage until they'd been paid. And there was a big issue getting paid, but eventually they went on stage and got paid, and it was great. They're great. They were one of my favorite bands at that time to see live. They were fantastic. I think actually my 2 favorite bands at that time to see live were probably the Police and UB40, both great bands at that time. And they did and Eddie Grant was due on next, but he'd been arrested, and there was a big hoo-ha. The promoters had basically been doing fraudulent stuff, etc. So Eddie Grant didn't go on stage and he didn't get paid. We went back to where we were staying to pack up, and they were also, we're preparing for the worst, because obviously we're not sure how mafioso the promoters were, etc., etc. So it was quite frightening is the wrong word, but it was quite exciting. It was basically exciting, for me as being a young person involved in all this. And at this time, Simon said to me, who's the manager at the time of the band, "Would you like to come to Brussels with us to see the band there?" And so he got me a ticket, and I was very lucky enough to go with UB40 to Brussels. And I got to spend a lot of time in the evening with the guys. Really nice, really, really, really nice guys. Got to know them. I went down into Brussels main high streets late at night. What went on there shall remain between us, but it was really fantastic, and it was a great experience. It was an absolutely fantastic, great experience for me. Another thing, as I was being bedded in, TC sent me over to Miami for a convention to promote the projects and the artists that we had. And one of my jobs there was to meet with the owner of a Miami-based record label that owned the rights to Pluto. Pluto had already had a hit in 1976 called Dat Thing There. And Tony had been aware of the recordings of a track called Your Honor. And he always believed this could be a hit, so he wanted to bring this and sign it up. So part of on my trip to Miami, I met the guy. I always remember because it was the first time I had surf and turf. We stopped in a restaurant, I had lobster and steak. I remember it very well. And I was staying in Fort Lauderdale. It was a very, 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 very nice time for a young kid. And that was the one thing I learned about the record business it sort of taught me about the best things in life. But once you've lived such an exciting life so early in your life, it's very hard to sit at home and watch a soap or watch TV. And it sort of changed my outlook on life forever. If I hadn't, you never lose what you've never experienced, right? So if you hadn't experienced it, you don't miss it. But once you've had it, it does get you used to a certain lifestyle. And that was just one of the very few trade-offs I had to make. Then back around this time, Tony was dating Karen, who was a Page-Free Girl of the Year. So Page-Free Girl of the Year was basically a topless model for The Sun. And she was a lovely lady. And he decided to make some business cards. He liked the Japanese business card where you had the English on the front, the Japanese on the back. So he put his wife on the front with Marylebone delivers the goods, and on the back he had all the business information. And obviously we would give these out in business, and he was happy to do that. Tony would later marry Karen, but at this point she was his girlfriend. And that Christmas we were planning to go to this would be 78. We were planning to go to Antigua, the three of us, but unfortunately that got cancelled because I think this was TC's really big break from Marylebone. I think it changed his life. I wouldn't say it changed his life forever, but it changed his life in that cycle. There was a record label called Ensign Records, who were what they call a licensed label with Polygram at the time, and things weren't working out, and it was in a bit of a mess. And in essence, because of the relationship that TC had with Eddie Grant, and other aspects of the owners of, not the owners, but the managing director of RCA Records, he was able to do a deal with RCA Records to move them from Polygram to RCA. It was a very, very big deal. I can't remember exactly, in those terms. It was like, I can't remember exactly. It's sort of 300,000 payments up front, which was big for a record label then. So it was a big deal. So we actually never ended up going to Antigua. We actually did this over Christmas. Tony would do this deal, but it would really open doors for him. On one of, especially, we were Marylebone per se. We were the big players within RCA at that time. There was a marketing meeting which I went along with TC to every week at RCA, where there was a guy called Gareth Harris who was the marketing director, and all the other. As I remember, there was a lady, Judy, who was the marketing person at Ensign. Nigel Grange was the person that owned it. And it was generally a really good insight into how major record labels worked, et cetera, et cetera. And there were some very interesting opening situations as far as the record business was concerned. And that was really my first entry into the record business. So that wraps it up for this show. In the next show, I'm going to talk about some of the major things that happened in the music business working with TC, and some of the life lessons I've learned. So up until now, I would say the one thing you can probably take for the first two episodes as a young person looking back at my life is when I was 16, 18, everything was black or white. And when you get to my age in life now, everything is shades of grey. And I think that's a really important lesson to learn. As I said, you can see things really that age of black and white, right and wrong. But life evolves, right? And then sometimes, when you have to make decisions that affect your family, and sometimes you get put in impossible positions, you have to make choices you don't want to make. So, as a young kid, I just saw it right or wrong. But I guess I was never put in a position where I had to make a choice, which both were bad choices, right? So I guess that's the one thing that I would take from my early time. Anyway, if you like the video, please hit the like button. Please subscribe to the video channel, and please hit the notification bell so you can be notified of the next show when it comes up.
Thanks for watching the video, and please feel free to connect with me on my personal website, nickstewart.co. Really looking forward to hearing from you. Bye for now.